Morning. Well, good morning, everyone. Chris Camody with Gray Robinson. Thank you all for being here. Can everyone hear me all right? Am I talking to you? Okay, good. When this panel came together, we were obviously all very interested in this. We live in this world. I live in the world of law and politics. We like to say the intersection of law and politics as we play up in Tallahassee and sometimes D.C. And as you've seen over the years, there's been a lot of movement from the legislative process. To give you some perspective, 29 states now in the U.S. have autonomous vehicle laws on the books, some more aggressive than others, and Florida has one, has a couple laws that's come through, most recently House Bill 311, signed by the governor, that, amongst other things, allows you to not even have a driver's license when the vehicle's in fully autonomous mode. There's some other issues Matt and I were talking about earlier that he may not like or what have you, but needless to say, Florida, without any doubt, is leading the nation as far as being ready for autonomous vehicles. But there's also these things called flying cars that are starting to emerge. If you've been paying attention, South Korea recently said they're going to put $40 billion into their transportation infrastructure with a focus on electric, autonomous, and flying cars, or eVTOLs. Just recently, Porsche and Boeing announced a partnership that by 2025, they fully expect that they'll have commercial passenger drones available, and by 2035, Porsche is hoping to offer you an even better style of car, one that will fly and drive. So in many ways, the future is now, if not almost now. And I turn to this panel as we open this up. Orlando is seeing 1,500 people a month come into this community. We're expected in not too short order to have 600,000 additional vehicles on our roads. This is going to have a major impact, hopefully in the positive, for our community, not just the state and the country. And so I'm going to open it up to the panel. If you could, tell us a little bit about your background, not too much. We want everyone on the group here to hear more about our discussion points, and then we can get moving on here. So we'll start with Matt. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good morning. I'm Matt Broffman. I'm the Director of Innovation for Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer. My role encompasses lots of things, one of which right now is focused on the flying cars, or VTOL, which is the idea of how do we make better use of our airspace for transportation, so also known as urban air mobility, and so that's a little bit about what I'll be talking about, and then also working with a team of folks on the autonomous vehicles and how those impact what we do at the city and the transportation within our downtown and within our region.
Jason, go ahead.
Jason Eichenholz. I'm co-founder and CTO of a local company called Luminar Technologies. We are here, there's about 350 people of us worldwide. We've got 250 here in Orlando, developing the core technology, the manufacturing. We have an office in Silicon Valley. And we're really focusing on the vision and perception for these autonomous vehicles. So in order for them to be safer than humans, which is really the bar that they need to be set at, and to have that level of performance, they need to be able to perceive the world around them. And these cars today, unfortunately, are a little bit nearsighted, and they have trouble figuring out what's going on around them. And so that's what we develop here, using the high-tech technology coming out of the military and aerospace foundations in this area. And we brought that together to create Luminar.
Thanks. Good morning, Joe Moye. I'm the CEO of Beep, based here in Orlando. In Orlando. Where the hell did that come from? It's early. I need another cup of coffee. But really excited to be here today. Beep, as you may know, based here in Orlando, specializes in the first mile, last mile, fixed route deployment of autonomous vehicles. We launched our first routes in Lake Nona just a couple of weeks ago, actually 5 weeks ago. Have had great ridership and community adoption, and really excited to be part of helping bring a lot of investment and technology around the autonomous space here at Orlando.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm Ken Witcher, and I'm the Dean of the College of Aeronautics out at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, and we've been in this aviation airplane world for about 96 years doing education and training. So when all of you are pilots and you're flying to your local restaurant instead of driving there, we want to make sure that happens in a safe way. So that's what we're here to talk about.
Well, Joe, I'm going to pick on you first. So I said the future is now.
Joe from Atlanta,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, Joe from Atlanta. It's a show on HBO next year.
I did fly in from Atlanta last night, if that helps at all.
So you're first in market on autonomous systems. So in many ways, the future is now in your world. What are you seeing that's worked well, and what are the challenges so far after deployment?
Yeah, great question. I think what's interesting is, I think there's a lot of hype around this anywhere, anytime, any speed autonomous model. And the reality is, you got to crawl, walk, and run here in the deployment of these vehicles. And what we've been able to experience with the deployment of these shuttles is, one, really rationalizing the routes so it's conducive to advancing these technologies, using what's available today in a route that mixes with traffic at the proper speeds, that has the right level of calibration given the environment that you're putting it out to relative to things like pedestrian interfacing and the things you've got to do to react to the environment around you. Probably the biggest lesson learned for us has been a wildly successful deployment. We couldn't be more pleased. With our partner there in Tavistock Development Corp. It's really got a great vision for the deployment of these vehicles, several other routes coming before the end of the year. But I think the biggest learning for us, and this is something we were chatting about earlier this morning, is you still have that human factor. The biggest risk for these vehicles is not them hitting something, it's something hitting them. People trying to get around the vehicles in a rush, doing the things they need to do to get around this new innovation. And so it's, that's something we're really kind of focused on, taking those learnings and advancing the technology to be, considering some of those dynamics of the swerving cars, if you will.
Indeed. Well, Jason, you're actually trying to make sure we see those things that we're hoping to avoid. Tell us a little bit about how you're improving that.
Yeah, so the technology to do this is hard. It really hasn't been a lot of innovation for about 10 years. And so the market can really be considered in sort of two. There's the technology required for what we call commercial operations. These are the robo-taxis, the beep shuttles, the fleets, the self-driving trucks that are going to be out there on the road. And those are going to be the first things that come. And then there's the second wave, which will be these driver assistance features. And you're already seeing these, things like lane departure warning systems. And you're going to eventually see, instead of just automated cruise control, like a traffic jam pilot. Then you're going to go see highway autopilot. And you get to the point where I want to go, which is I want to be able to drive, say, from here to Miami, throw the kids in the car at 11 o'clock, close your eyes and sleep. Right? That would be great.
Yes, please.
Yes? Yes?
Yes.
Right? That would be great. And you may still need to, because of the human effect, you may still need to drive onto the highway and then hit the autopilot button. And you may need to hit the button to get off the highway and drive to the house you're going to, that last mile. Okay, I'll take that. So the technology needs, unfortunately, are the exact same because of the human element that Joe mentioned. The challenge is the economics are different. The economics for robo-taxi fleet and the compute requirement, you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars per car, and then you're going to try and put that into a volume consumer product that you go pick up at the dealership. And so the technology needs are the same, but vastly different in terms of price point you're willing to pay.
So how is that different? How is that different than what Tesla is doing today? Because I know that you have a fairly strong view on that.
I do have a fairly strong view, and I am a huge, huge Elon Musk fan for what he does. And see, I have a friend who we used the summon feature last week, and
As long as there's no one in the way, it's fine.
Yeah. So look, the bar for performance from a regulatory, insurance, and public perception is much higher, right? Every working day, today, a working day, the equivalent of a 737 drops out of the sky in automobile fatalities in this country. But it's geographically and temporally diverse. It happens on I-4, and then nobody hears about it again for another couple days. Or it'll happen on I-95. If a school bus crashes and kids die, or a bus happens, it makes the news. But think about this, and I want to just set your expectation. If on Monday a Southwest jet dropped out of the sky, Tuesday United, Wednesday Delta, what would MCL look like on Thursday? It'd be empty. But we are used to these accidents happening the way they do, and so we're okay with it. And yet, if a self-driving car gets in an accident, it'll be in the news forever. So we want to get the self-driving cars to match the performance of humans so that it's few and far between, and yet it still could happen because of the human element.
So Matt, the city always does a good job trying to prepare for the future. This is the future. What are you guys doing, and how's this impacting y'all?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we look at it in a variety of different ways. From the autonomous vehicle side, at this point the policy is set, and so it enables autonomous and semi-autonomous pilots to happen in the state of Florida. And so we've actually a number of times reached out to manufacturers, and you'd think that, okay, if we said, all right, you want to operate here, what do you need, that there'd be this list of things. But for the reasons Jason just described, their list is nothing, right? Because if we have to do something to put in the roadways so that they can operate, then it's not sustainable for them to operate across the country. Because just because Orlando puts it in, think about the millions of miles of roadway we have in our country that are operated by random municipalities that have 20 people in it, right? Or counties that have 100 people in it. And so they're not going to put that infrastructure in place. So there's very little that we have to do to make it commercially sustainable. There's some things that we're doing from a pilot perspective to help folks out. And then we're looking at the policy side. So when you start to think about, parking lots, right? And what happens to all of our parking garages downtown and throughout our community? What happens to the parking lot in front of Walmart when everyone's taking an autonomous vehicle and that parking lot's no longer needed? We still today require people who build an apartment building downtown to put parking garages in. That will change, whether it changes this year or in 5 years. That's going to change, and it has to change because it's not sustainable.
But building on that, building the parking garages, it's getting exceedingly difficult to get a 40-year bond to go build parking garages today, because the people who are underwriting the bonds are saying, well, I don't know if you're going to need that in 40 years. How do we get a return on investment?
Yeah, because basically we bond our parking garages and we pay for it with the fees we collect from you all when you pay to park there. And so they're looking at it and saying, well, in 10 years, who's going to pay to park there? And the answer is likely no one. And so they're very concerned about that. And then we're looking at the VTOL side of things. So we think that VTOL, which is this idea that, and I know we say flying car, but think less Jetsons and more electric helicopter that's eventually autonomous. And the reality is that the cost per mile of an electric helicopter is less than that of an autonomous vehicle, right? And so if we can get the ability to go from point A to point B and not have any infrastructure needs in between, right? So you can go from here in downtown to the airport or to Port Canaveral. We don't have to worry about the roadways in between. We're not having to build all of that out. It becomes a relatively accessible way to get around and reduces the congestion that we currently have on the roadways. But that also brings in a bunch of things for us, which is who's going to own them, who's going to operate them. Is that spurring more sprawl, right? One of the things we want is people to stay within an urban environment. That makes it really easy to go out and develop outside. So those are the kind of things that we're thinking about.
You said vertical. You know something about going vertical over at Embry-Riddle, don't you, Dr. Witcher?
Yeah, we do, as a matter of fact. And the cool thing about this technology is that when I sit here and hear these conversations, these challenges that we're going to face as this innovation comes to reality, a lot of this stuff has been challenges that we face in the aviation aerospace industry for years. We've had self-flying airplanes for a lot of times, and I guarantee you everybody in this room has flown on an airplane that could have been completely autonomous. As a matter of fact, if you've ridden on a 777 in the last 25 years, every one of those aircraft have a capability of what we call zero-zero landing capabilities, which means it can land at a runway where there's zero visibility and come down to zero altitude with zero visibility and stop within 18 inches of the center line. I don't know if you knew you were on that aircraft, but that aircraft had that capability. And there's a reason why Southwest didn't crash on Monday and United didn't crash on Tuesday with 737. And that's because of all of these years that we've had developing this very distinctive safety culture in the world of aviation. There's a reason why you're more likely to get killed in a car driving to the airport than once you get on the aircraft at the airport. And what we're here to do is to make sure that we collaborate with this innovation on the ground, this technology, this cool stuff that's coming, and take these lessons we've learned for years and years and years and integrate it into this so that it is sustainable. It is something that we can regulate with some confidence that's out there. And the cool thing about it is this stuff's happening at some level today, not carrying passengers, but North Carolina this year, UPS just this year got permission in North Carolina to fly, to deliver medical supplies with autonomous systems in an urban environment. Zipline, a U.S. company, is over in Rwanda. They've been delivering blood to rural areas via autonomous vehicles for about the last 3 years with tremendous success. So this stuff is becoming a reality. We just got to work together. I think all the innovators that you see here today for sure, and take the lessons learned from all segments of the industry and apply them, and it's going to be exciting. Can't wait to see it.
So let's help get some information for us. Raise your hand if you've been in a car when it's been in fully autonomous mode, with Tesla or whatever, okay? So that's what about a little less than half, I would say. So realistically, when is that going to be the norm? I'll look at our guys who are actually deploying here.
Let the LiDAR.
When I-4 is done.
Yeah. So, it's everybody's got
So
an
not on
opinion
my
on this,
lifetime.
and I'll offer you mine. I think the anywhere, anytime, any speed model that you see so much about in the press is debatably 10 to 15 years away. And that's where these use cases need to continue to grow and expand and prove out the technologies. And I'll give you an example of what we're doing from the standpoint of kind of our 2-year plan. The first is fixed route, low speed, scheduled shuttles. Goes from point A to point B on a fixed schedule. It's a programmed route, and it's, although very complex from the standpoint of pushing the technology, it's pretty straightforward. You then advance into something like ride hailing, where you can then add the dimension of an app where you're able to hail the shuttle so it comes to you in a specific time. You then expand the geofence a bit to where you've now got multiple destination points, and the shuttle can determine the easiest way to get to you, the quickest way to get to you based on kind of the demand profile of that area, that geofenced mapping. And so kind of pushing the envelope of that and using technologies like what Luminar provides to then enhance the speed of these vehicles. The challenge with the speed is not the fact that the vehicles can't go fast, it's their natural reaction of when they see an obstacle is to stop and stop hard. They respond 3 times faster than a human does when it comes to identifying an obstacle and applying the brakes. So it's things like that that need to continue to advance before you can kind of get on the roads, eliminate drivers in total. And by the way, we think in that shuttle model, you're going to see true autonomous deployments within the next 18 months. So it's not a long ways away as far as kind of really advancing to that level of true autonomy, level 5 autonomy.
I'm curious, what do you think is the acceptable failure rate? So, I mean, you talked about, how many people die today in automotive accidents. Does that mean if it's one less with autonomy, we're good? I mean, how do we balance that? And how do we get the public to face that?
So, yeah, the public acceptance of autonomous vehicles today is, the bar is very, very high. It's really, really high, and the expectation is, 5 nines of reliability. So it's really easy to get a self-driving vehicle to work 99% of the time. That last 1% is really, really hard. And we've been saying this since we came out of stealth almost 3 years ago, and we're told, oh, yeah. This is a hard problem to solve technologically. We think we've got the solution to that, which is the perception system. Figuring out the route planning and how to go here and how to go there. And when you have full situational awareness of what's going on around you, it's really easy to operate a vehicle. But to get that perception in all weather conditions, to get it working when it's hot out, when it's cold out, when it's snowing, who clears the snow? I know we don't have to worry about that here, but who clears the snow off of a sensor package when there's no driver? Who gets out to scrape the windshield when there's no driver? You got to figure out all those things as well, and things that people don't necessarily think of. I think over the next 5 years, from a time period, next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see more and more driver assistance features, ADAS Plus features, these traffic jam assists, which is, and Audi just came out with a product where they can go up to like 30 miles an hour on a highway and do a traffic jam assist in Europe, but they can't get the regulatory approval here in the US. So the regulatory burden is going to be really interesting, and I think over time, and we're really fortunate in Florida. For you who don't know this, the regulatory environment for autonomous vehicles is extremely supportive of these vehicles. Senator Jeff Brandes really is pushing this through from a state legislature perspective, and he talks with us a lot. He talks with the industry a lot. He drives the Florida Autonomous Summit, no pun intended, to kind of make this happen. But that's driver assistance. The full autonomy, you're going to see companies like Beep and others that really drive the program forward, and it's going to be over years or decades until you get safer than human driving in all operational domains that aren't geofenced and aren't limited in where they go.
So look in your crystal ball a little bit even further. When we get there, is this? Do you expect this will be we'll own our own cars, like in the futuristic movies, like, or is this we're going to be more like there's some conglomerates that loan them out, what have you?
So if you come to my office, you'll see car stuff. I'm a car guy. I love cars. I grew up with posters of cars, on my wall as a kid. I love to drive. I hate to commute. Right? That's the distinction for me as a car guy that allowed me to say, all right, I'm going to go change transportation. This is the single largest transformation to transportation since the Model T. We're going from horseless carriages, like we did from horses to horseless carriages, to doing the same thing here. I think I'll always own a car. If you're in a more rural area, I think you'll always have your Ford F-150 around the farm to go do stuff. But in urban cores, it's going to be mobility as a service. It'll be a subscription model for it. There's a train station right there. Show of hands, who took the train to get here this morning? It's right there. We all drove our vehicles. 2% utilization in this country of cars. They're all sitting in the parking lot right now. So I was going to Uber, but my friend Adam picked me up on the way in because we're trying to reduce our carbon footprint and came down today. So that's going to change when transportation is less expensive. But where I see it happening is you're not going to have your self-driving car drop you off from work and then go back to your house and park in your garage. That's kind of silly. What you're going to do is you're going to set your app that says, I'm going to take a self-driving vehicle to a train station. It's going to take you to where you need to go, and then it'll take you that last mile, whether it's to a theme park or whether it's to the airport or whatever. If you can make it seamless and easy, because the app knows when that train arrives and it's sitting there ready to go, or if it's raining, it's warm, it's ready, or the air conditioning's already on in the car, why wouldn't you do that? So I think to finally answer your question, you're going to see families go from 2-car households to 1-car household, and then eventually they're going to do some sort of service where they can rent a car if they need to go someplace far.
And I think the same on when we talk about flying cars. Even there was a recent article about the Boeing-Porsche partnership, and one of the headlines is, Boeing and Porsche is going to let rich people buy fancy flying cars. And I got to tell you, we've talked to OEMs up and down the chain, and not a single one of them thinks that their primary market is selling direct to consumers with VTOL. I mean, there's no you think about underutilization of cars. Think about the underutilization of a flying car sitting on your pad, and then if you want to go somewhere, you've got to drive back to your pad to get to it versus being able to go to any pad throughout the area. And yes, maybe you want to pay more to get the Porsche service, and you'll pay for that Porsche service versus maybe the Ford service. But I think very few people will own their own flying car.
Well, so how dare you? I'm going to own one day. When I'm very rich, when do we expect that this will occur, though? So Porsche announced that, and they said 2035 is where they think. That's probably an optimistic, maybe not.
2025.
2025. Well, those are drones, but do we really think the flying car, if you will, 2025 or 2035?
Yeah, that really depends on you, the people that spend the money in this area. The technology's here. I think you've heard that very clearly. The regulatory environment's catching up pretty rapidly, so we can support that. It all turns down to public adoption. And a few years ago, we started introducing these little things called small UAS into the world. And boy, people got upset thinking that there could be something flying right outside of your window that could take a picture into your backyard or something like that. And we, to be able to have that technology adopted, and we're still struggling with it in some areas. I'm sure you've seen the news around here. We had to go out to everybody and kind of address that. And kind of what we'd say is that, nobody wants this kind of stuff around them until it's incredibly valuable or makes their life a lot easier. So the first time that we found a lost hiker, the first time that we took a life preserver to a drowning person in Australia with rip currents and we dropped it with a UAS, now you start seeing this stuff in a positive light. When we were initially selling this technology, I was in Vegas, and I would tell them the first time that your fresh fish are delivered at half the cost, it starts making a lot of sense, and I kind of like those things. Or what if we had one up in front of you that give you real-time traffic information, and cut your route time, your driving time down by 30 minutes? Well, those are the kinds of things that start making you feel good. Like, hey, that stuff's pretty cool technology. I think we got to get there with the urban mobility type of conversations too. When it just makes sense, when it's easier to use your app to go out to your local restaurant than it is to go get in your car, then I think we're going to see that switch. And again, the key to this is that we can't mess up between here and there. You know, if we run one of these things into a 737 or into a school bus or something like that, then man, that's just a huge setback. So as we're in these early stages and going through these conversations that we're having today, we got to get it right, or we're just going to keep pushing that public adoption type dates back down the street.
I think there's no way, and I'll get in trouble for this later, that by 2025 we don't have at least one, if not multiple partners doing vertical takeoff and landing here in Orlando in the Central Florida region. It'll be piloted. I mean, to be clear, we're nowhere near ready to have autonomous flying cars, but the technology is there. Next week, there's a company that's doing another demonstration out in Singapore. There's dozens of companies that have announced. We've talked to a bunch of companies that actually haven't even announced yet, and so we feel fairly confident that technology is ready. The FAA regulations will get there by 2025, about there, but a lot of them are looking at how do we comply with existing FAA regulations so they can start doing this. I think the big question is the public acceptance. It's why one of our partners in the project here in Central Florida is one of our hospitals, right? Because at the end of the day, I might not feel okay with people flying over my house until you think about, well, okay, if it's for emergency services, wouldn't you feel comfortable? And I think that's a huge piece of it. And I know what Jason's going to say, so I'm going to let him say the other public acceptance part.
No, I'm not. So I flew on a medical helicopter for a number of years for the fire department, so I'm all for it. You mentioned public acceptance. So when you're going to say the mayor's going to be okay with me doing a VTOL on Lake Baldwin Lane in Baldwin Park at 11 o'clock at night?
No.
So the thing that people don't talk about is the noise. So there's public acceptance. I'm sure we're going to get it safe. I'm sure we're going to get the technology work. And there's startups that are beginning to address the noise.
I think that what people don't realize, so two things. One, again, you're not owning it, so it's not taking you to Lake Baldwin Lane. It might take you downtown where we've got different noise regulations. But I would tell you right now, if there was a VTOL, if there was no roof here and a VTOL flying overhead, you'd barely notice it. The noise levels that we're seeing now, takeoff and landing, right, when it's pointing down, more. But a matter of fact, all of the partners we've talked to, the commercialization vehicle that they are looking at would fit within our noise ordinance. Now, let me be clear, there are a lot of things that fit within our noise ordinance that was happening in your backyard you would not be happy with. But we're looking at that, and we're addressing, as silly as it sounds, we're looking at, do you require the VTOL vehicles to fly over highways? And as weird as that sounds, but it makes sense.
We would fly in a medical helicopter to go pick up a trauma patient to take them to the hospital. And people would call 911 to complain about the noise. And that's for a medical emergency evacuation. And now these helicopters are loud, and I get it. But I want to do VTOL. I can't wait. I go to the CES show every year, and I get my selfies and pictures in all the newest and latest and greatest products. So I'm a technology enthusiast. When these things are zipping around creating noise the way they do on takeoff and landing, I think the public acceptance, but that's his problem.
And I thought what you were going to bring up, and I think one of the things, actually, by the way, for a lot of companies, what sets Orlando apart is that we've acknowledged that, and we are putting together our plan for how we work with the community. Orlando has a good reputation for, we don't just go do things, we talk with the community about it, and that's part of what has to happen between now and 2025. I thought what you were going to bring up is, I think one of the ways we get over the public acceptance barrier, both for VTOL and for autonomous vehicles, is the fact that we have 80 million people who come and visit us.
So actually, that's a great segue. So the car companies, the reasons they're interested in Florida, A, is we've got a really good regulatory environment. B, is that turnover of tourists. What a great way to get lots of different people to get the user experience, to figure it out. And that is a great fertile ground for us to plant the seeds for autonomy going forward. And that's one of the things I'm really excited about, is the transportation from the airport. It's sort of the same thing. But there's going to be a mindset, because I couldn't help think, there's a train station right there. And none of us even thought about taking the train. Or maybe some of us did. One of us actually took it. So it's thinking about transportation differently, and that's the fun part. So I'm excited about VTOL. I'm excited about self-driving vehicles to go do it. I'm excited about it personally, for my family, for transportation. I have a son with special needs, So for him to have reliable transportation, if he doesn't get driver's license, is going to be amazing. And I'm looking forward to that. And there's also stuff in the community happening today with VTOL that people may not know about. David Metcalf here in the audience, with UCF and IST, they're sending medical supplies over the Bahamas using drones. People know that? That's really cool. And that's making a difference today. So I can't wait for this technology to come. It's going to be about insurance, regulatory, and consumer acceptance, I think.
Everyone already knows we got the airplanes going over Baldwin Park anyway, so we're used to that noise. But maybe if we could shift a little bit. I'm seeing all the folks in the room. A lot of them are in tech, but maybe not all of them are in transportation tech. As this comes down the line, what would you tell these folks in the audience to kind of anticipate and expect? Because obviously the impacts of this industry are going to be far and wide, not just on transportation and getting folks to and from the airport or up and down the road. Where do you see shifts in tech as a result of this industry growing?
Yeah, so I'll take a pass at that. I think, as I described before, and there's some incredible technology that's already available today. It's, and you actually use this term, I think, perception, and how you describe what Luminar brings to this scanning capability. And that's really what's so critical, is how do we now take the technology, which is very capable today to do some of these lower speed, fixed route environments that I described, and start to evolve it where the artificial intelligence comes in and is starting to perceive the environment versus just reacting to the environment. And again, that's going to take advancing the use cases from where we are today in an environment that runs between 12 to 15 miles an hour, and again, mixed traffic, pedestrian interfacing, but a very, very kind of straightforward route to getting into more complex intersections and interfacing with the traffic signals and doing the things you've got to do to then truly be able to operate better than a human can operate. And that's going to take a series of evolutions in years, I think, to get to, and again, I'm not in the aeronautics arena, so I won't profess to even try that. But I do think from the standpoint of these multi-passenger vehicles and ultimately the autonomous cars and taxis themselves, that's going to be a decade to a decade and a half. We're going to see this evolving to where, that's ultimately on the road. One thing I wanted to add, and it kind of comes back to this community or public acceptance that is something that's kind of overlooked a little bit. We've got some workshops with US DOT, NHTSA, and actually the Florida Highway Patrol coming up over the next couple of months. And, those organizations have got to start thinking about the realities of these technologies hitting the road. As an example, if you have an incident investigation team with FHP that comes out to an accident scene, they've got a process they go through today where they do certain things to capture evidence and ultimately, declare somebody at fault and make those appropriate determinations. A very manual process. That's very different than coming onto a scene and saying, give me all this telemetry data so I can see exactly what the vehicle did at this point in time. What did it see? What did it not see? Let me see the video data to kind of reenact the incident, if you will. And oh, by the way, they need to start thinking about what skills do we now need in-house at FHP to deal with these realities, such as cybersecurity. How do you come upon a scene and determine that cyber was not a fault of a particular accident and things of that nature? So it's going to take a while to evolve the skills, the resources, the trainings of a lot of the first responders and other groups that are very critical to, I think, this ultimate public acceptance of these technologies. And that's an area we're working really hard at.
Yeah, jump in.
Tech, we can talk about that. By the way, things are changing so fast. If anybody in here is space fan, what's going on today, right now? Matter of fact, as we speak, that's the first ever. Spacewalk, but what's unique about it? First all-female spacewalk happening right now. That's the first ever, by the way, ever in the history of the globe. So that's kind of cool, and that stuff's changing fast. Who's watched SpaceX? We're all Elon fans here for sure. I hope we are. I wouldn't even speak there. So who's watched the Falcon 9 come back, right? Come back, right? come back. And up until the last 23 seconds or so, that thing's at about 780 miles an hour. That's a big chunk of metal coming back here towards Florida, and we all trust it. By the way, it doesn't have anybody on board. It's fully autonomous. So, man, this is getting exciting, and that's just since 2015 we've been doing that. So this stuff's changing so quick. So if your question is, what's the next technology that's going to enable this stuff? I have no idea, but there's some incredibly smart people out there right now that's figuring it out pretty quickly. So it's a fun time from the tech side to see how it changes everything that we do for sure.
I think the other thing is, and to tease my next panel, which is on the experience economy, I think the other part is we're going to have people sitting in vehicles eventually that are autonomous, and anybody who thinks that what we're going to do is like get our laptop out and do work is mistaken, right? There will be a whole economy built around the different types of cars you can get into, what the amenities are going to be, what they're going to have, and they're going to turn it into an experience. And so I think there's a wealth of opportunity because no one's figured that out yet, right? I mean, that is going to be a marketplace in and of its own.
I want to thank this panel. Please give them a big round of applause. May you all have a great day of networking and enjoy some of these panels. Thank you for joining us today.